Welcome to the York Daily Record Sunday News Editorial Board. I'm Scott Fisher, I'm editorial page editor here. And we are here today with several members of the York County Republican delegation to the State House of Representatives. We have Stan Saylor, Seth Grove, Kristen Phillips-Hill, and Kate Klunk. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
So I guess the big issue that's on everybody's mind, and it's on the front page of our paper every day, how many days we've gone without agreement on a state budget between the legislature and the governor. Where are we with that? What's the status, and is anybody hopeful that we'll see anything soon?
Obvious was that we passed a budget the governor vetoed. First governor in 60 years to veto an entire budget. We have tried to do overrides on parts of the budget. That was voted down by the Democrats. We needed 2/3 vote. We're going to attempt next week, the Senate's going to this week put stopgap bills in to fund necessary services, some of the school issues, busing, so on and so forth, to get at least last year's levels. Been informed as I was coming in here today that Democrats are at this point expected to vote no on those funding bills at this point. I think that's where, I guess my frustration, I think that of some, is the feeling is that the newspaper media world has been putting the pressure on the General Assembly when the General Assembly has not only passed a budget, and we put the governor's budget up for a proposal, not one Democrats wanted to vote for the taxes that the governor, for his spending plan. So what I think is frustrating is that nobody has beaten up the governor over the fact that not only was there a budget passed and he had options available to fund these necessary services, but the fact is that in all of this governor has not responded now 4 weeks to another compromise proposal that was offered by Republicans. I mean, he wanted more money for education. Republicans said, here's your money, here's your compromise, you've got to agree to pension reform. Now, just about every media outlet in the state has endorsed liquor privatization and pension reform. And so the governor gets basically everything that the taxpayers and everybody else is asking for. He gets his education money, $400 million that he wanted, and we get the pension reform, which is what taxpayers want, media wants, and the state store. And yet nobody has criticized this governor. A few papers have, Gettysburg Times has, in saying, Governor, where's your proposal? Where's your alternative?
Well, I would say in our defense, we've criticized both. We've said get to the table, come up with some. Obviously, he wants to resolve this at the table with a sort of getting some of the things that he wants beyond what you're talking about there.
Yeah. Here's the issue. When we offered a budget compromise to him, it wasn't yes, it wasn't no, it wasn't here's my counter proposal. It was literally, I'm just going to ignore it and hopefully it goes away. When you act in good faith to try to bring resolution to this, and you do an offer, I mean, that was huge. It surprised us, it surprised him. I think the shock coming out of the meeting and him not knowing really what to say was a huge shock. Nobody really expected it. For the House and Senate to come back and say, we'll give you your win. Here's your $400 million. We expect our priorities, so everybody gets a win. And that's usually compromise. I mean, that's how you negotiate, that's how you compromise. And for the most part, when you do compromise, I think most business people who have been in a negotiation say you clear off, if you agree to something, clear it off the table and continue to work your way down. My frustration with the veto override votes was just that. We had line items that matched. We took Wolf's budget, our budget we passed, lined them up. Perfect, they're identical. There wasn't anything in there that was controversial. There wasn't anything in there that anybody was really fighting over, we should fund it at this much or that much. And for us to try to move that to get funding moving, to say this is literally compromise. You can't get any broader definition of compromise than what those veto overrides were.
If you were in his seat, would you do that? Would you give up your bargaining power, basically taking 2/3?
Well, every governor has. Every other governor in the state's recent history has, from all the way back to Governor Rendell and others, Schaap, have done those kind of things, and they've gotten things that they've wanted. Some very controversial things that they were able to get. Nobody as a whole in general has called on this governor to say, Governor, where is your proposal? Because the Republicans have put two out there now. This governor's sitting there negotiating. And the one thing that's missing in this whole thing, I don't think anybody other than us as Republicans are talking to our Democratic colleagues in the House. Ask any of us what our Democratic colleagues are saying to us. My Democratic colleagues, like, I won't mention the name, but very liberal member from the Southeast, because I don't want to put him out there. He said, Stan, you could keep us here till Christmas, and we're not going to have more than 30 or 40 votes for a tax increase on our side. So nobody has said to Frank Dermody or Jay Costa, the leader of the Senate, and I like both guys. They're both nice guys. Nobody said to them, guys, where can you come up with? You have 84 members. What will your 84 Democrats vote for? Nobody has put a proposal on the table that Democrats say that they will agree to either. So the governor and the Democrats in the House and the Senate sit back and say, we want more, but nobody wants. Even Kevin, who, again, nice guy, Kevin says, well, there needs to be compromise. Well, Kevin, what is that compromise that you and your colleagues will vote for? Because you can't ask Republicans who have passed a budget, who've agreed to give you all the money you want for education, to come out and say, okay, we're going to give you more. How much more is enough? Where is your proposal to counter what we have already said?
Well, and to follow up on that, I believe that this newspaper said that our effort on June 1st, which Seth authored, to put the governor's taxing measures, the revenue measures that were necessary to fund the $12.7 billion in tax increases over the next 2 years, put it up for a vote, and not one single vote was cast in support of those taxing measures. So, if it was a gimmick, as the paper said, where's the necessary legislation to put these taxing measures in place in order to fund what the governor is proposing? And right now, the only thing that's out there is Representative Wheatley from Allegheny County circulated a co-sponsor memo. I mean, I checked before we headed over here. Mm-hmm. It's not been introduced yet. So there is absolutely nothing out there on behalf of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle to push this forward. And even when our colleagues, Representative Sterla and Representative Shriver, held a press conference, I spoke to Angie Mason. She wanted a comment, and I said, well, Angie, how do they intend to pay for this? And there was no response. Mm-hmm. To this day, we have no response on how any of this will be funded.
Well, the shale tax, is that off the table with the Republican side on this?
I don't know. As far as I'm concerned, I think it's a bad idea when you're already taxing shale at a higher level than you are in Texas and other places, Oklahoma. You'll be higher if we pass the governor's proposal, higher than West Virginia, Ohio, Indiana, so on and so forth. I don't know how you know when you...
How are we higher?
Because all those corporations already pay a 14.99% tax, plus the 4.5%, I think it's 4.5% impact fee that we have on.
Are they exempt from that tax?
No, they're not exempt from any. In Texas, they only have a 7% severance tax, no corporate taxes on the gas. Mm-hmm. So that's where you get the disadvantage. So where you have a product like that you can get in Texas, Oklahoma, Ohio, West Virginia, Indiana, and on, it's tough to tax your product. I mean, I hear from Reuters all the time, for instance, about our gas taxes here, how uncompetitive we are compared to Maryland. You go to Maryland, a lot of places, you'll find gas is selling at a lot cheaper. So if you work in Maryland, you're buying your gas before you come home or first thing in the morning in Maryland rather than here. So you've got to understand, people are going to buy their best
product. The gas tax last session now.
Right.
It was for construction though, right?
But it was for construction, and it was the right thing to do. But it does make things uncompetitive when somebody else's prices right next to you are cheaper. And the other thing you have to remember is Pennsylvania doesn't have an infrastructure to get our gas from the fields to the Port of Philadelphia or to anywhere else. They're just building them right now. So you don't have what they have in Oklahoma, Texas, and Ohio, and that's that pipeline to get their gas into the system. We haven't gotten ours into the system very well. We're still selling a lot of gas, but we are not the most efficient system. So if you're a company that looks to how can I increase my margin of profits, and everybody does, they're going to say, well, we're just going to stop what we're doing in Pennsylvania. And we're already seeing Halliburton, Chesapeake, and on, laying off workers, moving drills out of Pennsylvania because of the proposal. Just the proposal has closed down a number of the drilling sites and laid off hundreds of employees.
And that's the scary part about all this. The industry is moving out. So if you put a higher tax on an industry that's already moving out, is that industry going to stay, or are they going to continue to develop elsewhere and move out of the state? That's the economic
that? I mean,
problem.
I've heard sort of anecdotal, like this guy, there was this one example of moving How widespread is that?
Well, it
movement?
is pretty widespread. I just did an op-ed a couple weeks ago in the New York Daily Record talking about that. Halliburton was one in Indiana County, and then out in, I believe it was Clearfield County, there were about 60 jobs that were lost. And I don't know if you've been to Clearfield County, but there's not a whole
I
lot
lived in
going on.
Clearfield.
Okay, you lived in
Yeah,
Clearfield
so
County.
you know.
So you know that 60 jobs, 60 good paying family sustaining jobs in Clearfield County, when you lose those 60 jobs, that is a huge economic
Yeah.
blow
Yeah,
to that type of a community. And I had the opportunity, it was one of my first trips as a state legislator through the policy committee, was to go out to Washington County, go to a drilling site, go to a distribution facility, a Mark West distribution facility, and see everyday people working in these positions that the shale industry has created. It is absolutely amazing. Young people are coming back, which I think is critically important to the future of Pennsylvania. If we do not, right now, try and attract younger people, we are going to lose as Pennsylvanians. We absolutely need these jobs. They're welders, they're engineers, they are very good family sustaining jobs, and without those jobs, those people, as soon as 100 people are let go at Halliburton, 60 people are let go, that's less people going to the restaurants, less people going to the dry cleaners, less people going out to a movie. All of those industries are going to be hit. Not to mention personal income tax. Those folks aren't going to be paying personal income tax. They're not going to be paying sales tax. It is a huge economic ripple effect if you institute the severance tax. It's not just a tax. You have to look at it at a broader scale of its actual family sustaining jobs. I'm sure your buddy's back in Clearfield County. I'm sure you probably know somebody back in Clearfield County who has been positively impacted by the shale tax, or by the shale drilling, but then also negatively impacted by just the talk of it. If you look at what has happened since November, since the election, a lot of companies have decided to move elsewhere. They're moving to Ohio. And I think it was you who was out traveling.
We were
out
coming
west.
back from Indiana and couldn't
couldn't
get
find
a
a
hotel
hotel
room.
room.
And I finally got the honeymoon suite in Oil City, Ohio. I said, why? And they said, natural gas drilling. And to just put some numbers on it, each rig in Pennsylvania generates approximately 400 jobs, both direct and
Right.
indirect.
I think we all agree that
And
it's a good thing for the economy.
We've hemorrhaged about 30,000 jobs in just a few short years for a host of reasons. But when a tax is being threatened to be imposed that's just going to be the death knell for the industry, they're sitting on investment money. And I think the other myth that really needs to be cleared up, and I'm sure these guys could chime in on this, is that there seems to be an equation between education spending and a shale tax. Not one dime of this shale tax that has been proposed will go toward education. So it is a myth that really must be debunked.
And your county's already this year going to suffer because the money coming in from the sales tax that we already have, the impact fee, is less than what it was last year. So all the areas of the state are going to suffer because you can just see by the less revenues that we're bringing in from the current tax on the gas companies, it's less money. So your county, instead of getting all but $500,000 a year, and think about this. This is something we've done in Pennsylvania versus other states. We didn't just throw the shale money into our general fund. We made sure we protect the environment. Money going into the environmental, parks, cleaning green here in York County. The county commissioners have been using it to improve our communities. And that's something we made sure that when we wrote that impact fee, that money going back couldn't just be nilly-willy used for anything that a county commissioner or somebody wanted to use. It had to be used in what I call the green environmental issues. And a lot of our communities here in York are benefiting. But because of the move out and the lessening of the drilling just because of the threat of the tax, and the low cost, and I'll tell you, the low cost of energy right now is also affecting the industry.
Sure, yeah.
So what I'm just saying is that we have been very responsible with Pennsylvania in the legislature, and I think in the past with Governor Corbett, particularly on the impact fee, of not getting carried away with it. It's easy to tax large corporations, but remember, Caterpillar, who had 1,800 jobs here in York County, moved out of here a long time ago, and that had nothing to do with taxes. That had to do with the fight between the union and the corporation. We can't, and a lot of counties can't afford the impact that a shutdown of the gas industry in Pennsylvania would bring, let alone our state's economy. You know, one of the things that I think we've been trying to do is take a more balanced approach. It's great to tax large corporations, but when they start choosing to move elsewhere, it doesn't help our youth that we're sending. We have more kids coming out of college than any state in the nation. We have more colleges and universities, but they're moving elsewhere for jobs. And for the first time in a long time, Pitt and Penn School of Technology, which is in Williamsport, is training people how to drill and work on drilling rigs, so that we're not bringing in people from Oklahoma and Texas anymore. So this industry's had a real positive impact on our own young people here in Pennsylvania, as Kate mentioned earlier. It's been positive.
Before we get too far away from the impact fee, I want to ask you about something. It's kind of a minor thing, but so you just said that that money is really intended for environmental issues, clean and green and so forth. The county commissioners just recently earmarked $30-some thousand, I think, for a new roof on the what is it? The Golden Cloud Tower.
Golden Cloud.
Is that an appropriate use for that kind of money?
I have to go back. Under Act 13, there was a huge slew of line items that county commissioners could use that money for. I can't verbatim tell you what they are now. We can get them for you. Some of it, I thought it was a little more open-ended than what it should have been in the first place. It went from tax relief, I think there was some housing stuff in there, environmental projects, clean and green. So I'll pull the law and get you that specific.
Strikes us as whims on the county level.
Yeah, and bring the hotel
Not on your
tax into
level.
it. Yeah. Bring the hotel tax a little bit into it too. That was a little bit of a fight getting the hotel tax done too, because we didn't want to see tourism money just given to county commissioners to use for WAMs for whatever. That money should be used geared towards bringing in tourism. That was kind of the I'd say probably 3 to 4 years ago, the initial fight over setting that stuff up moving forward. I think we worked it out, and
If the county commissioners at that time had not fought us on not using it as WAMs, but using it strictly for tourism, that tax would be in place today. But it took us so long to finally get a compromise with the county commissioners that things in the General Assembly changed about the whole taxing issue. And so that's created a problem.
So it's been kind of a battle of public relations over the last month or so. I mean, what you guys just said, we passed the budget. It had 2/3 of what the governor wanted. What more can we do for him and so forth. Are you winning that PR battle at this point? Do you find like...
I know when I go out, I just had Dover Carnival, Dover Fair, Fireman's Fair. I was with a couple of my local Lions clubs, so they jabbed, got a bunch of done stuff. But generally, people overwhelmingly said, hold the line. Don't give Wolf an inch. We cannot afford his tax increases. That was the sentiment. Hold fast. And we're here out saying we need to negotiate, we need to get a final product that we're not going to give away the bank. I think the broad-based taxes are off the table. And even just within the realm of analyzing the political situation of vote counts, you need 102. There's not 102 votes in the General Assembly for what the governor wants. And behind closed doors, if we were at the budget table negotiating, he'd still be talking about his $12.7 billion tax increase. He is still on his package.
He hasn't moved at all on
No.
that?
No.
Out in public, it's shale tax and education funding. Behind closed doors, it's still $12.7 billion in taxes. He still wants every single thing he asked for.
And he's not being honest. Kate just pointed out, he's talking about shale tax and education, when not $1 of the shale tax is going to education. Somebody needs to call the governor on his honesty. I mean, look, I like Tom Wolf, okay? But I'm not sure where Tom Wolf went to, because he sure as the devil isn't my governor right now. Not the Tom Wolf that was here in York County. Because Tom Wolf that I knew in York County was one who was more reasonable. This governor that's currently named Tom Wolf is all about ideology. It's not about compromise. One of the things I tell Republican members, brand new Republican members, is we are here to govern, not to play ideologue. Look, we're either conservatives, moderates, liberals, whatever it is, and that's all well and good. But if you don't govern when you're in charge, you have failed the people back home, no matter what your ideology is. And this governor has been sticking by this ideology, this left-wing ideology of tax, when he's been given a compromise proposal after the other budget, this new budget proposal, that does put Pennsylvania in a very positive light. Fixes the pension crisis that I don't think anybody, almost nobody but a few teachers, deny is a crisis. And it sells the state liquor stores where 75 to 80% of the taxpayers of Pennsylvania want, and he gets his $400 million for education. That's a big win. That's a big compromise for anybody to get. Governor Rendell would have snapped that up in a minute if he had been there.
What about, the argument from the administration is that there's a lot of one-time funding sources and gimmicks and so forth. What's your response to that?
Rendell had it.
Well,
I mean,
everybody has, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be within any budget you pass, there's going to be quote-unquote gimmicks and stuff. I mean, I would say his entire severance tax is a giant gimmick. He wants to tax the natural gas industry, bond money, and pay for the bonds through the severance tax through alternative energy processes. I relate it to if the General Assembly would pass a law that said, you know, Tom Wolf, you have to give all your campaign donations to Tom Corbett. I mean, it doesn't make sense. Why on earth would you do that? It'd be like us forcing you to give any profits you have to one of your competitors. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to do that. And that's the driver behind the severance tax. If you look through the legislation, it says education twice, in the summary and the title of the bill. All the money is dedicated protects the impact fee money, and then it does bonding for alternative energy bond stuff. So I just go back. There's just some dishonesty from the administration moving forward with actually coming out and just being honest with people. Like, don't go behind closed doors and say, you know, I want all my $12.7 billion. Walk out of there and say, it's just about shale and education. It's not. It's just dishonest with the taxpayers.
Because if it was only about the $400 million for education and the shale tax, we wouldn't be here right now.
That's true.
We would have a budget right now because we have given him that $400 million for education, and he has yet. Tomorrow is what, 4 weeks?
4 weeks.
Yeah.
4 weeks, and he has yet to give us a decision on that. We've given him what he wants.
And his
Everyone
response
wins with this plan.
is, this might be painful for you, but you'll thank me in the end. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, that was really disturbing to me. You know, because right now our most vulnerable citizens in this Commonwealth don't feel like they're going to thank him later. They need help now. And that's why I think it's really important that we've tried to do everything we possibly can to make sure that we take care of the people of Pennsylvania and fund those core responsibilities of government. We're sitting on things like Title I money, which funds educational programs for children that live in poverty. IDEA money that funds educational programs for students with disabilities. We just need to pass a general appropriations bill to disperse federal money to our local school districts. By doing what the governor did, that federal money is sitting in Harrisburg, not in the school districts.
Now think about this. He okays, via his little signature of his budget secretary, for the House Democrats to get, you know, their money, you know, and which is unconstitutional and just really immoral when you say rape crisis centers, cancer patients, domestic violence victims can't get money, but the House Democrats, to pay them, they can get money out of the state treasury. What a hypocrite as a governor and the Democrats have been.
I missed
over
that.
the whole
What happened
process.
there?
You can have that.
Yeah.
That's signed by the budget secretary saying that the Democrats can have money out of the treasury. They can borrow money from the state treasury to pay their bills, to pay their payroll, and you know what?
But they
That's just
were
fine.
running out of money, weren't they?
Yes,
They had
but so
they
are
had
other
less
people
money than
going to,
you
the
guys.
House Republicans.
Okay,
are gonna
they
run
have
out.
less money and they have less members.
members.
All I'm going to say is we have managed our caucus very, very well with a lot of cost savings prior to this because it's the right thing to do to the taxpayers.
The budget kind of increased it though, didn't it, over what Corbett had?
Yes, because
told?
Corbett had line item vetoed to
Yeah.
Democrats and Republican money. And that was the process. And again, the money in the Senate and House is divvied up, or the House particularly, by dividing the total 203 members into the appropriations, and then you get based upon your members. That's fair. When the Democrats are in charge, they get more money than us, and vice versa. So that everybody's fairly funded. You get to decide what your payroll is, who gets paid how much in your own caucus, or what benefits each of your employees or your not members, but employees get. So there's no difference. If you spend your allotment because you want to be more luxurious in the benefits you provide to your staff, or you want to pay them higher salaries, that's fine. But you can't blame it because you're getting less money. It's how you spend those dollars. I don't think taxpayers want to see one Republican versus one Democrat, or even two Republicans against each other, saying, well, you get more because you're there longer, or you're from this particular area. You get the same amount of money per Republican and Democratic caucus that everybody gets. And if how you choose to spend that is your own choice.
Well, and Kate and I can tell you, we just sat through as new members, new member orientation. The benefits package for Democratic members
It's pretty nice.
is very nice and significantly more generous than that which we receive. There are no leased vehicles in the Republican caucus. Every Democratic member is entitled under their caucus rules to receive a vehicle.
Well, you know
So-
that we have praised our delegation.
I know you
I
did.
know,
You
I
just
know.
did very recently. Thank you.
Yes.
And Kevin's,
We
Kevin's
cut
included in that.
yes,
He's
yes.
included.
Kevin is frugal.
Kevin, you're obviously Kevin Schreiber, Democratic State Rep. What have your conversations been with him? You kind of alluded
I was
to
with
that.
Kevin today, and we toured York City this morning, York High. I'm going to be going back and touring an elementary school, meeting the principals, talking about what they're changing. Brandon Carter, who's the principal at the senior high, was showing me how he's realigned the high school and what he's doing with ninth graders, with the academy and stuff. So we have a good relationship with Kevin, just as we did with Steve Stedler before him and Eugene Pasquale. We talk, we have disagreements, but I think when we talk to Kevin, it's like, Kevin, we get the propaganda. We both all do propaganda, media stuff. But the bottom line is, we put real solutions out there. You don't have to like them, but you need to come up with one too and say to the public, here's our solution to this compromise, so that the public can make a fair judgment. If you're not coming up and just keep saying compromise, how does the public know you're compromising if you're not showing any cards?
Stan, I want to get on that propaganda thing, because you just said that both sides use propaganda. Why?
Because you have to reach out to voters.
No, you don't know
and people-
who to believe and when to believe it. Like, if you use propaganda, how does the public know what you're saying now makes
Well,
sense?
I will say on the Republican side, we've given you exactly what we proposed to the governor. I gave you, right now, the signature by the governor's people saying authorizing the treasurer of the state to give money to the House
Do
Democrats.
you think that Tom Wolf would not do that for the Republican caucus when you run out of money?
Oh, I don't know if he'll do it or not. He may. I'm not saying he won't. I'm just saying that we believe it's unconstitutional. It's never been done in the state's history, and we think it's very clear in the Constitution. You can't give money to anybody without an appropriation. Without an appropriation, and that's done by the General Assembly, not by the governor. Now, the governor has to
So
sign that
if you-
appropriation
If
bill.
you did run out of money and he gave it to you, you wouldn't take it?
We're not taking it.
Yeah.
We believe the Constitution needs to be followed. If we have already made private money from banks that we will borrow to make payroll if we run out of money. That's the way everybody else is doing. Rape crisis centers, everybody else is doing that and paying interest. The Democrats are going to get away without paying interest. We're going to pay interest because we feel we are no different than a rape crisis center
we're
or
gonna
cancer
pay
centers. Huh?
We're going to pay it.
You're going to pay it, absolutely. But I mean, we, from the point of the General Assembly representing the taxpayers, of the House Republicans and Senate Republicans, believe we're not exempt from the same rules that affect those same groups. Why should we have to get money and not pay interest on it, and yet rape crisis, cancer centers, everybody else, schools are borrowing money and paying interest? Why are we so special? We should be on the same level as everybody else. And the Democrats have set themselves above everybody else.
The big question is the constitutionality. If in fact the governor's office, the budget secretary, the treasurer can appropriate dollars without a line item from the General Assembly proving that, why do we need a General Assembly to begin with? Why do we need a budget process? If that's the case, then the governor has unilateral authority just to send all the money out per however he wants to send it out at his own discretion.
How about funding for police and those kinds of things? Is that unconstitutional under that?
Again, it's, so the state employees currently, their unions took it to court. So they have a court case that says they have to be paid. As there's lines in the state treasurers where we're just collecting revenue. They're pulling from those. It's a special fund within the Treasury to pull those funds to pay the state employees. State troopers are underneath that, conceivably, because they're state employees. They have to be paid, where we didn't appropriate the line item necessarily for their funding. At some point, I think that line item goes broke. There's no more money that's going to be coming into it. That's 2 or 3 years down the line, not a big deal. But it's a big problem to say from our perspective as a General Assembly, separation of powers, you can give whomever how much money without an appropriations line item. There's nothing statutorily allowed. We did, it was vetoed.
Okay.
The GA bill. That's the thing that says how much you can give to certain entities. Without that, there's no legal authority to do it. So that's the big problem with this, is if in fact the governor can give the House Democrats as much money as he wants to unilaterally, it surpasses the entire General Assembly, which means he can enact any law, any amount of funding he wants to unilaterally, and we no longer have a Democratic Republic.
Yeah,
it's an issue.
It's an issue.
It's an issue.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's bigger than just the money aspect. It's that separations of power.
Yeah. Can I circle back just briefly at least to, you talked about funding for alternative energy that's part of the governor's. Do you guys think that we should be boosting alternative energy? Are you concerned about
No.
climate change? Do you think that's an issue?
Now, climate change is an issue, but you don't tax pizzas and give it to another restaurant. You don't tax the gas industry and give it to alternative energy. If we want to invest in alternative energies, my issue on energy has always been, including the natural gas, is there are people who came out with big proposals to give a lot of tax breaks to natural gas companies. My whole thing was, when we proposed things, was to give it so that it utilized people. The market has to dictate what energy you're going to use. We know that solar energy is not the best place in Pennsylvania to be using it. It's expensive, it's not very efficient, as is solar, or as wind energy right now. There's a lot of people who go out there and look at windmills that we have around the state that aren't blowing very often. But when those are blowing and we're using those solar energies, we can't shut down a hydro plant. We can't shut down a coal plant. We can't shut down a nuclear plant, because the inconsistency of those types of energies. I'm for those, but we all know that there's got to be, for Pennsylvania in particular, to utilize the sun, the solar energy, the whole product has to be better manufactured, and the technology's not there. Penn State's doing research. A lot of universities are doing research on solar to try and improve that. You can use it in more places. If you're sitting in Florida or Texas or Arizona, solar is perfect. You still have to have somewhat of a backup system. But in Pennsylvania, it's just not something. We have too many cloudy days. Same thing with wind. Certain places in Pennsylvania, it's fine to have the wind energy, but we're finding them everywhere. And the thing is, you and I are subsidizing that. It's by our choice or not. If you want to use green energy, as we call it, which isn't so green because it's causing a lot of pollution, and depending which group, the Audubon Society totally opposes wind energy because it's killing a lot of birds. So it depends who you talk to. Climate change is something I think everybody's concerned about. It's how you approach it. The thing that I would say to you, and I was in the environment long before anybody even knew what the word environment was. I was involved in York County Ecology Club in the 1970s, early 70s. I was representing Downtown High School with the York County Ecology Club. We were recycling. We were cleaning up streams before they were born. But anyway.
What about the rest of you? Are you concerned about global warming, climate change?
I don't think you're going to use alternative energy for a base load energy system. You're still going to have coal. You're still going to have nuclear, natural gas. In some way. You're just never going to have enough wind, enough solar to overtake the amount of energy use, energy consumption in the United States. And it's gotten worse because of EPA regulations, what the federal government is doing. They're shutting down coal plants, so we have less and less base load energy creation plants, coal power plants in use. So it's a scary thing where we used to export a lot of energy. It creates a problem down the line.
Like Bronner Island switching to gas, or at least the option to switch to gas,
Yeah.
are those kinds of moves reasonable? And is that does government play a role in sort of
when they
pushing
make
that and guiding
sense,
that?
when they make sense, it's just like coal. They have come up with cleaners that clean. If it's a large enough coal facility, it makes sense to change that, put those cleaners in. But what people forget about climate change, it's not the United States. We're a small part. There isn't a country that compares to the United States in the way we've cleaned up our streams, and we have a ways to go, and our air. But China, India, Pakistan, companies from here have moved there because it's cheaper, whether it's electricity or it's labor, whatever it is. You can't save the world from China and India and Pakistan and Russia as they pollute the daylights out of the world. The United States cannot save the world if we don't have an international agreement on pollution. If you're asking Americans to sacrifice good-paying jobs so that we can clean up the environment, it doesn't do us any good, because we'll be sitting there eating rice and only rice for lunch, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, while China and everybody else is selling all the products. You know, that's what I think we're missing here. We have to have a uniform policy around the world on energy. I'm a real believer in cleaning up the environment. I think most politicians are, really, truthfully and honestly. But the bottom line is, it's got to be about fairness. It's not fair for American corporations competing with China, India, or Pakistan, where you see a lot of products on labels of shirts and everything else. Our industry is closed down because Yorktown Kitchen is a perfect example. A company that was in red line with 300 good-paying jobs with pensions, health care benefits, closed down to move to Virginia, 98 miles away, because Governor Rendell said, I'm not making an exception for you. Yorktown Corporation said, we will cut emissions with a brand new plant in Redline by 75% from our current emissions. We will go from 300 employees to 500 employees in Redline. And Governor Rendell said, no, we want 100%. It was going to cost that company $10 million more and $1 million more a year to build a facility. So they were going to cost them $10 million more to go to 100% reduction of pollution and $1 million a year to make sure that happened. You can't do that. You've got to be more competitive on the market, and that's the whole thing with alternative energy. Let's do it. Let's clean up the environment, but let's get China and Russia and everybody else involved in
What do
this
you think of
process.
the idea of putting a cost in carbon, a carbon tax? Kate, do you have any thoughts on that?
No.
I tend to be anti-tax, so no.
Do you know that it's supposedly revenue neutral and?
But
Well, I think the funny thing is we're really circling back to drilling for natural gas in Pennsylvania,
That's what
because
we
it's
should
one
do.
of the cleanest
it is.
fossil fuels that we have to burn, right? So, we have to have security in our grid. If if you have a brownout and you can't print your newspaper to deliver on Sunday morning, you've got a problem. We need security in the national grid, in the electric that we deliver, and we're not going to get there by dictating what types of fuels to use. I mean, clearly, we breathe the same air you breathe. I want to breathe clean air, but I'd like to see the market drive it, and certainly chasing natural gas drilling out of Pennsylvania when we're the second largest natural gas producer in the United States, and there's a reason that OPEC is driving down the price of natural gas by flooding the market. They don't like the fact that we are on a path to energy independence in the United States.
They're afraid of Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at a lot of our companies around here, we use natural gas. All of the chip fryers at Martin's, at Utz, the chip industry, the pretzel industry, all of those ovens fired by natural gas.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of our delivery trucks have switched over to natural gas here
Shipley
in this
has
area.
invested in putting in natural gas
Filling
stations, right?
stations.
Right.
We have the lowest cost energy in the nation right now, or not in the nation, in the Northeast, and particularly almost on the southeastern seaboard, because of natural gas, and that's important, because Johnson Control, who was looking to move out of York County, Maryland, the governor of Maryland, offered to build Johnson Control, a brand new plant, no cost to Johnson Control. Why did they stay in Pennsylvania? Because our taxes were lower overall on their employees, not on their corporation. And their cost for natural gas and their cost for electricity was lower than it was going to be in Maryland. So their overall operations, they would have had a brand new plant, but at the same time, they would have lost a lot of their employees due to higher taxes and everything else. So it's about being competitive. Pennsylvania, for all these years, and you think about where we were as a state and where we ended up, we were in horrible shape shipping our kids out of here with the money we're spending in education. Finally, we're moving back. We're not where we need to be, but I do believe that if Pennsylvania sticks by this standard, it's tough. Everybody wants more money for education, more money for roads, more money for everything else. But if you have to suffer a little bit because of the nation's economy is not recovering, people aren't making what they were before. We all know that by the statistics. But we have a chance in Pennsylvania going back to be, and I've said this over and over again, the Keystone State, not just because of energy, but because we have good research institutions here, great schools. So the key now is to build that infrastructure that we have without getting carried away with taxes. And if in 3 years from now, when that pipeline for natural gas is here, we will have a ton of money because we'll be able not only to sell our natural gas in this country, but we'll be able to export it. We have oil that was just discovered here in Pennsylvania as well. So it's not just natural gas now, it's oil. And the real question comes up in the shale tax. This is a question that's been talked about by some constitutional attorneys, is whether it's constitutional. Because we don't tax oil, we don't tax coal that's extracted out of the ground, we don't tax limestone,
Timber.
clay, or anything else. So can you choose one particular item to tax it and not tax others? Because Pennsylvania has a constitutional provision that says, I'm going to tax newspapers here in your county different than I can tax newspapers in Pittsburgh. Or I can't tax senior citizens different than I tax average citizens without a constitutional change. We did that to provide property tax rent rebate. We had to change the laws to fit that, or the Constitution to fit those kind of
And as
things.
you remember, the governor proposed a graduated income tax, and, soon found
Right.
out that because of the uniformity clause, it was not something you could do.
Right, right. Did you guys go to Israel this summer?
Yes.
Speaking of the Middle East,
Yeah.
what was the story with that? Why did you go to Israel, and what did you learn?
Yeah, that trip was planned. We were supposed to go in January. January session was up in the air whether we'd come back because Corbett was still in, so it was canceled. They rescheduled in January for August. No one thought the budget would have been late at that point.
Have you heard from people saying, hey, you should have been here waiting to vote on
I mean,
something?
a couple people. I think the realization that the impasse, had we been close to an agreement where we had votes, we would have been back there. Dan Frankel and Mike Hanna went along. They're both in Democratic leadership. Literally, as soon as they were done on conference call on leadership, they came back and were like, hey, what happened? Budget negotiations. So we probably found out faster than
Yeah, some
these
people.
two sitting back here. But
We were in York County holding down the fort. You had nothing to worry
But
about.
Mike Hanna was sitting there
Yeah.
during some of our sessions on a conference call with the governor and the Republican leaders and Democratic leaders from Israel. And, that's the thing is that we went there, we met with a business, for instance, who's building helicopters. That University of Pittsburgh, for instance, is interested in purchasing, still doing the testing models. They're quite amazing, the size of a Humvee. You can take it in, like you can't take a normal helicopter with the rotary blades in next to a mountain and rescue somebody. You can't land it in the middle of downtown York or Pittsburgh. These helicopters will, and he's looking to open a business over here. He's married to actually a woman from Pittsburgh. So we met with him. We met with members of the Knesset. We met with members and leaders of Muslim and Jewish and Baha'i religion and Christian religions and how they're working together. We visited schools. It was interesting to see, and I think too, the other good thing is Matt Bradford, who is one of the most liberal members of the General Assembly from Montgomery County, we formed a good friendships.
Yeah.
Mike Hanna, Dan Frankel's another liberal member from Pittsburgh. Good friendships because we were sitting there in a different situation. But I think what I brought back from Israel is that there isn't a real problem with Muslim and Jewish and other religions inside of Israel. It's the radicals outside. When you see Muslim children working together with Jewish children and Christian children building robots and going to college together and doing projects, and the religious leaders doing the same thing in community centers, to say, I think it gave me a new perspective because I'm sitting here before I went there thinking, well, the fight is inside of Israel too. And it's not. I'm amazed at how well Muslim and Jewish and Christian and all the different faiths in Israel are getting along. And it gave
Outside
me
of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Outside of Jerusalem. That's the asterisk.
Yeah.
Jerusalem is the, if I would go back, there's some things I didn't get to see. I would spend like a day max there and get out of there. It's just where the fanatical religious groups are. Outside of that, and it was neat to see career in technology. They embed STEM education, kindergarten through 12th grade. We had a great briefing. They developed a way, if you shot a photograph of a field, they could tell you how much nitrogen is in that field for production off your picture. Just email it in. They're starting to ingrain arts within their STEM education to make it STEAM. And mind you, this is all done while rockets are flying. I mean, at any time, any second of the day, you could hear the siren. Anywhere in that country, you have anywhere from 5 seconds to a minute and a half to find shelter before that rocket's landing on you. So through all of this, they have, I think, a far vast superior career and tech education system than we do here. A lot of it's predicated on the military use because a lot of the military jobs are career and technical education, and it's basically a pipeline to the military, either military or community service. But it's impressive, and they can do it. They're a small country. and they can do it under great duress. So it
Tell
was
about Gaza.
Gaza. Gaza was an interesting trip. We went to a small town, Nesvit. They're still building, so we got a tour of their land development, land use, what they're doing, and it was I think it's Philadelphia. It was in Philadelphia City's partner city. And they actually came in and developed more interaction between the different groups. And they had a large segment of actually Jewish Ethiopians come into that area. So it was very diverse. They did this huge arts program trying to bring together Jewish, Muslim, and then obviously individuals of African descent as well as European descent together. It was amazing. They have a great community center. Again, all of this, a year ago, that's where the rockets were coming in from. So we boarded the bus, we went actually to the border, we saw the holes where they're digging tunnels. We were about 50 yards from the actual line. We were just sitting there with binoculars watching them knock down old shut-out buildings. And we asked them, are they rebuilding them? No. Basically said the Israeli government is paying those individuals to knock down those buildings. They re-cement the cement, and then they build the tunnels underneath. So they're not, the residents of Gaza are not benefiting from any of the money going back into the Gaza Strip. The military establishment there was, literally it's ISIS, Hezbollah, Hamas. You're just staring, like waving at them. We actually had to get pulled back at one point because they spotted a sniper in the field in front of us somewhere, so we had to pull back a little ways. But
dangerous trip.
Look, 2 weeks later, when we were up in the Golan Heights, where we were at, they had 3 rockets fired into that area. So you're standing there. I can't say I felt safe the entire time. I felt uncomfortable once on the Dome of the Rock, Muslim-controlled area. It just felt uncomfortable. Congressmen, there was a congressional delegation that went there the next day. They got harassed a little bit, but it was nice. But I felt safe the entire time there. But you just knew in the back of your head at any time rockets could come flying at any second. Very peaceful. Like I asked 2 ladies there in Gaza. One was pregnant, the other one has 2 kids. I'm like, why do you stay here? Why do you stay? And their answer was, it's our home. What would you do? That's it. The same.
And I like to stress, there was no government money. It
Yeah,
was
I was going to ask you that, because
we
government
pay
money.
ourselves.
We pay.
Okay.
Some of the money will come from the Pittsburgh or Philadelphia Jewish group to help subsidize some of it. But they pursued me for years to go over because of my position in leadership as well as my seniority. I will tell you that from basically you got up at 6 o'clock in the morning and you got back about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. We might get back, we would get back, I think in most cases, we got back to the hotel about 5:30, 6 o'clock, had 45 minutes to shower, because it was hot, and get new clothes on to go to dinner and to a lecture or whatever we were doing that evening for dinner. It was not a vacation. Very enjoyable trip because it was very educational. I enjoyed the interaction with the different religious leaders and students and stuff. But Israel's not a place I would necessarily go to vacation. There's some beautiful spots, don't get me wrong. But Israel's not a vacation spot for Stan Saylor. It was a real eye-opening, and I think, we're going to talk probably at the Jewish Community Center and other religious facilities about what's going on there. Because I think that's a real key. I think we get a misinformation a little bit, or perception, maybe that's a better word, bad perception that there's constantly fighting within Israel. Other than, like Seth said, there's protests in Jerusalem. Because, of course, the Jewish and the Muslim areas are the same area as far as the religious temples are concerned. And it's a matter of who quote unquote, owns the territory in downtown Jerusalem.
And territory is, your proximity to everything is, you think it's a bigger area than what it is. We were on the Jordan-Israeli border. Right there's the road to Damascus. The road to Damascus, the infamous, famous road to Damascus. At that
35 miles.
35 miles from Damascus. Literally York to Harrisburg distance from Damascus. And it was just mind-boggling how close you are to everything. Dome of the Rock's here, Wailing Wall's here, Mount of Olives is here, Church of the Sepulchre is here. You're just so close with all these high-profile religious sites that are so well guarded and protected. Jerusalem just creates so much animosity in itself. One bad thing happens in Jerusalem, the world looks at it but it's not like that in the rest of the country. You go to Haifa, it's amazing.
Is Pennsylvania that copter company?
Well, the
Hopefully.
guy is married to a woman from Pittsburgh, and we suggested that he
They're
talk to
looking at
Governor-
Boeing in the southeast. What a lot of people don't understand, the military aid we give to Israel, a portion of that has to come back to the United States. So as the entire career and technology industry in Israel develops, they're always looking to partner with U.S. companies to do the payment on the bring money back into the United States on military hardware and stuff like that. So
Interesting.
yeah. So it was, would I go back? I don't know, but it was an amazing experience. I definitely learned a lot. I took a lot away. One of the professors who teaches K through 12 STEM education, I got his card. We're gonna,
Okay.
talk, see how that's done.
Let's shift
Yeah.
gears for a second then. Are we gonna get a medical marijuana bill this year? Is it gonna get through the House?
Yeah, track that thing.
I don't, go ahead,
Well,
Kate.
I do know that our chairman in the Judiciary Committee, I sit on the Judiciary Committee, Chairman Ron Marsico, has been leading a working group of people who represent the spectrum on the issue of the
It's
hardcore no's.
Republican and Democrat,
Republicans,
right?
Democrat, hardcore no's to hardcore yeses, to middle of the road people who just don't know where they sit because they want some more information and have a lot of questions. And that working group has been meeting over the past couple of weeks throughout the summer here. And I know that they are close to a little bit of a report. They've done some research on some of the issues. I know I brought up some of my concerns and concerns that I had been hearing from some other Republican members on our side of the aisle with some of the folks who are on the study group, the working group. And we'll have to wait and see what comes of that. I know the chairman is trying to come up with a bill that's a little bit more of a compromise option because there are some folks in our caucus that are absolute no's, or people who just don't want that much of an expansion on the side of medical marijuana. So we'll have to wait and see what comes of this, but I'm hopeful that this is a good starting point for us to get talks moving and trying to get something passed. What that's going to look like between
It's
the
not gonna be
Senate, from the Senate
bill, though.
version
No.
versus the House version is yet to be seen, but at this point, I don't foresee the Senate bill, based on those conversations that working group has been having, that it's going to be the Senate
Well,
bill
just
in its
quickly, what are the
entirety.
main concerns? Just, we have to get into real depth, but what are the?
I think mine is, we've always had a patient safety system with medications predicated on the federal government, the Food and Drug Administration. And don't get me wrong, I think there's issues within there that Congress needs to fix. There's a lot of issues Congress needs to fix that they're just not doing. But it's designed to protect patients. I believe in the 80s, they said they had a magic miracle drug for AIDS. There was a movie about it recently. Was it Fort Worth Bank or something like that? But everybody flooded to Mexico to get this magical drug to cure AIDS. Ended up not working, and I think it hurt more people than it actually helped. Those are the kind of protections we have in place. We've never done that at the state. We've never approved a medical use of any kind of drug. It's always been the FDA through testing approves it. There are medical marijuana drugs moving through the FDA. I believe they gave them special licensing to move forward at an expedited rate. So a lot of holdup is that how you develop, and I personally would like to see it developed within the medical system. Doctor, pharmacists, licensed professionals within the pharmacy, within the confines of what we have, checks and balances. I'm fearful of the private vendor setup. It has to be a cash business because you can't accept credit cards or for that kind of stuff because there's federal rules. A lot of problems we run into states is the federal government's bans or their laws that don't allow us to move.
And it's a
on
lot.
stuff.
It's a lot of
Yeah.
those legal issues, and
Yeah.
that's one thing that I brought up to the chairman was my concern from a medical malpractice liability standpoint. It's a recommendation by a doctor. It's not an actual prescription. So, what type of legal recourse would a patient have if it doesn't work, if it causes other medical issues with them, if it's not the correct dosage? There's issues with how much research is out there to sustain a legal claim, even if there was a legal claim that a patient could bring. There's issues with medical malpractice liability insurance. Will that at all be covered by medical liability insurance? Will that cause doctors' premiums to go
Are
up?
those issues coming up in other states?
Well, I have them looking into it as part of this working group, and I have asked them to get me some information on that, because that is one concern, and I've actually heard that from a couple of other attorneys who practice in that medical liability.
And remember, we're the
standpoint.
highest, one of the highest tort reform states as far as premiums for doctors. That's why we
So
don't,
it's an issue.
many of our doctors graduate from medical school here in Pennsylvania, some of the best. But when you talk to the graduates from Hershey Med, and I have interns from there, almost everyone leaves because of our high insurance costs. So they're moving to other states. So this, adding on top to already the highest tort reform, is a problem. The other thing I think is, and Kate's far more knowledgeable of this than I, but every letter I get from every medical group, nurses, doctors, everybody has opposed it. I think the Cancer Society has opposed it. Just about every group, epilepsy has opposed it. Now that's a group that claims, or people claim, would be a solution for epilepsy. And epilepsy, I can't even say it. Right?
Epilepsy, yeah.
Thank you. Says no.
Well, so Representative Scott Perry has been trying to push a bill through that. I mean, are you supportive of his efforts there?
I think it's a great idea, because a lot of our issues would be resolved at the state level with federal action.
But you
So-
seem to have a lot of concerns, not just the federal, but the nitty-gritty, the medical aspects,
Well, it was in the
liability
Health
aspects,
Committee,
and so forth.
and it was re-referred to the Judiciary Committee. Actually, the bill, Fulmer's bill,
Simple three.
went to the Rules Committee,
Mm-hmm.
and it was because the Health Committee really wasn't in a position to address a lot of the legal issues that seem to be abounding with regard to this legislation. So,
And
and we've all met with people who have children who have severe epilepsy, and it really does tear at your heart. And you know that you would want to move mountains if it were your own child. But because we have to, it can't be knee-jerk, it has to be done responsibly, and that's why we have to work through all of these legal issues, so we don't have
Do you really think
problems.
marijuana is, I mean, it's less dangerous than alcohol. You have to admit that alcohol causes far more damage to our society than marijuana does.
I disagree with you, Scott, on that, in that when you look at states like Colorado that has legalized marijuana, look at the problems they're having. People are still getting killed over marijuana in Colorado.
Driving
And when you look
impaired
at-
is driving impaired,
Yeah,
whether you're,
but
whether
there
you're
are far
under the
fewer-
influence of
Yeah, well, that's because it's not
marijuana.
legal in
Because it's not
Pennsylvania.
legal.
If you look at Colorado and look at alcohol versus what's going on out there, look at the state troopers and talk to them in Colorado and talk to the people of Colorado.
I lived in Colorado for some years.
I'm just telling you that according to the reports, there's still people dying in Colorado. It's being reported in the media. The problems are going on. And no, it's not a problem here as much because it's not legal. I'm opposed to legalizing marijuana. I'm okay, and I've committed myself to supporting medical marijuana, but I want it done right. And I've told that to the Ferrero family who I visited, saw their son. I got to see their son scared the daylights out of me when he passed out and hit the wall with his head. I know what is, Kristen mentioned, when you visit and you see these kids that are suffering, it's not that you want to help. You just want to make sure you don't do any damage. And Seth hit the nail on the head, is the federal law's against it. The research isn't there. Kate, with the federal laws and how do you do it? It's a cash business. Well, there's a lot of things going on because we just aren't set up as a state. Colorado did it. I'm sorry, they did it. Excuse the language, half-assed. And their politicians are now admitting they made major mistakes. And other states are looking at it. Some states have done a far better job in what they've dealt with medical marijuana than Colorado. Definitely. But there's still a lot. And this is where, again, just because somebody else did it doesn't mean that we should do it. We should have legalized or got rid of the state source systems 50 years ago, and we still haven't. So we're sitting here with the medical marijuana where we don't even have research. We know selling state liquor stores is a positive thing.
So I would
So
say.
is it okay, I mean, the argument for the state stores is that we need to control these, this is a dangerous product. We need to make sure it's really tightly controlled. So you guys want to put it in private hands where it could be sold by some...
So is Scott Fisher going to buy more liquor because Stan Saylor owns the store or the state owns the store? Is that going to change your mind about how much liquor you buy a year?
I totally agree with that. I don't want to go to the damn state
So,
store.
yeah.
No, I'm just saying is, just the average
Here's a
person.
story,
that's got-
just let me just tell you the story about
Yeah.
my state store
Yeah.
story. The night before Thanksgiving, night people were kind of going out buying stuff for Thanksgiving. Went to the state store here on Route 30. The line was all the way around the inside of the, there was two registers open before. And I thought, to me, that was just like, that
like
is
Soviet-era
what-
Russia.
In Soviet-Russia, that's
Right,
exactly. It's like,
exactly.
come on, the private sector never would have done it.
Exactly.
Right. And that's my
Well,
whole point, is people who have used the argument that having private owners means that there's going to be more drinking. That's just absolutely false when you look at other states. That's just a lie. I'm going to call it what it is. It's a lie. People say more DUIs. That's a lie as well. I had one person say to me, well, I don't want somebody privately owned, because people will walk in and go out to the parking lot and drink a bottle of whiskey or whatever. I'm like, are you serious? They don't do that at the state stores now, and if they do, it's still illegal. You know, it's the arguments against the state store system is absolutely the biggest bunch of lies I have ever heard against anything. You know, to sit there and say that a private sector, there is a fact that by the year 2020, we as taxpayers will have to pay take money out of the treasury to pay for the state stores. Because right now, the money they make on the markup, and correct me if I'm wrong, anybody here, the markup is what pays the employees and their benefits.
Mm-hmm.
We gain in the treasury all the sales tax, the 18% Johnstown tax and the 6% sales tax. We will have to take money out of that to pay the workers and their benefits, which means you and I as taxpayers are going to start subsidizing the state stores. So it just comes down to simple common sense. Is let's get out of it now before we get deeper into this hole. I mean, facts are facts, and I don't understand when you look at 48 states, is if I buy liquor in Potter County, and am I going to pay more for a bottle of whiskey, vodka, whatever it may be, than I am in York County? Absolutely, because there's not going to be much competition in Potter County. But in York County, it could be cheaper, and it may be even cheaper from York County to buy it in Philadelphia. So it's about, just like gas prices. Parts of York County, I get complaints because gas in Brogue is more expensive than gas in Red Line. It's because of the location. And it's just, let's start using common sense.
Let's circle back briefly to medical marijuana. What did you think of Judge Kelly's decision did you read that
It's
story?
stupid.
Yes.
It's the dumbest thing I've ever seen in a long time, a ruling that a judge makes.
Yeah?
You have a guy that legally had an illegal substance, and he has
admitted to it.
He admitted to it. He has a laundry list of other convictions, similar topic. Probably should have been in drug court. I don't know. There may have been addiction in there, but you can't make that ruling and say it's just specifically for this one particular aspect. If you're looking for legislating from the bench, it was just that.
It was, and
I don't get it.
I hope it's appealed. It should be appealed, in my opinion, but I'm not sure if they are. Last time I checked, I had just read the article in the paper, so I guess we're going to have to wait and see if they do decide to appeal, but it's not good when you have a local judge legislating from the bench like that.
Yeah,
It just sets up very bad precedent.
It's like a court case from somewhere else that you hear about and people talk about.
The strange but true news.
Yeah, I've never seen a ruling like that out of a York County judge, Republican, Democrat, whatever. I've never seen anything quite like
But
that.
didn't sort of say to you that medical marijuana is kind of the gay marriage of the next frontier? It's going to happen, and so why sort of like, why drag your feet and delay?
You could say that about a lot of laws. You still have to follow the rule of law, or we become a lawless society.
And I think Kate laid it out, and everybody else here, in that it's not, we don't sit here and say that medical marijuana isn't going to happen. It's about doing it the right way. And that's all I think Ron Marsico, who's chairman of the Judiciary Committee, is trying to do, is not deny patients and children who are affected by this, or whoever, cancer patients, whatever, but let's make sure we know what we're getting into, because we're not, as a state agency, used to legalizing drugs. So if we're going to do it, let's make sure it's done the right way.
And remove the emotion from it. I was a policy major at Dickinson, and the number one rule was remove the emotion from the policy. Do not let emotion rule your policy decision. And as state legislators, we're bombarded with those families that come in, and it tugs at your heartstrings. It really does. But at the end of the day, as a state representative, you have to remember that you are making a decision for not just that family, but every single family within your district and in Pennsylvania. So you have to be smart in how you move forward. It has to be well thought out, well planned, well intentioned, and the emotion needs to be removed from it.
Okay. All right, so we're kind of running short on time here. Well, just a quick lightning round. Kathleen Kane, is she toast? Is she gone? Are you guys going to try to get rid of her or what?
I guess the
Just
Senate,
quickly.
the Senate can do it. At this point, I think she's doing more harm in office than good. Whether she's guilty or not, everything surrounding her is just dragging the entire department down. That's a very, very important row office. I can't hyphenate that more. I mean, top cop. So there needs to be resolution, whether she resigns, Senate removes her, something along those lines.
Okay. Civil forfeiture reform. Is anybody up on that issue? Are you interested in, Senator Fulmer has proposed reforms to that process? Any interest in that? Any concerns about that process?
We actually, at the heroin and opioid addiction hearing that the Center for Rural Pennsylvania held in York just a few weeks ago, Representative Grove asked that very question. It appears that there are some problems in the way that the existing law has been implemented in Philadelphia. We don't have a problem here in York County with people's homes being seized.
But you make laws for the whole state. Not just
Correct,
the county.
correct. And we need to expect that the laws will be implemented appropriately. So right now, that law does a lot of good in that, if those resources are left on the street, they will be potentially used in future criminal activities that could impair the community. We need to fix people's homes if we need to fix people's homes being seized inappropriately, then let's fix that. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater on this one.
But do you think that when somebody's caught with drugs or some ill-gained property, it's seized and then it goes through a forfeiture process. Do you think that they should not be able to be forfeited until there's a conviction?
How York County does it is when they bring the individual in, during usually the arraignment process where they may do some plea bargaining, they'll have the person sign off on the forfeiture of the assets at that point. York may be different from other counties, and I would agree with Kristen that we probably need to get best practices codified so we have a standardized approach throughout the Commonwealth to prevent any undue taking of property. I think the Philadelphia case was one where people were selling drugs outside the house, but they were not connected to the house, but they ended up seizing the house.
Right.
Probably bad,
A violation of the law.
yeah, probably bad judgment all around, but I think there's ways we can do to protect it, because Narcan here in York County is paid for through the drug forfeiture money. Like, the DA has utilized that, and it has, I think, very positive effects on York County.
But if that money went to the county, you don't think the county would say, oh, we're not going to fund the drug task force, do you? I mean,
When you give it to the county, you give it to the county.
Yeah. I think it's like anything. We have laws in Pennsylvania, that are very clearly how they're supposed to be enforced. There's always somebody who decides they want to bend that law to work for whatever reasons, personal reasons and professional reasons they want. I don't think we as a General Assembly can keep that from happening, but it's up to the courts to make sure it doesn't. And I think that's where sometimes some of these forfeitures, the judge needs to step in and be man up and say, maybe that's not a good term to use, but he or she needs to say, no, you're not doing this. And so that's where it needs to be. Instead of the legislature passing laws every time somebody violates the way it's supposed to be enforced, the courts should be stepping in and doing that. I mean, the problem is we already have plenty of laws on the books for a lot of this stuff. It's how one person interprets it, and other people tend to let them get away with it. And look, we all have a responsibility. But if we in the legislature keep trying to pass a law to fix every time somebody does something outside or curves the law to bend to fit their own needs, we just never will have time for really fixing the major problems.
you have something going on with Washington Township, the secession issue?
Yeah.
I saw
Stanza.
I'm a voting member. I get to vote Thursday.
You get to vote on that?
Yeah, I'm on the
Yeah,
board
how you
of
voting?
education.
Oh,
How you
wow.
voting?
I don't announce
How you gonna
it.
vote?
I'm not announcing yet.
Yeah, so the committee meets tomorrow. The select committee meets tomorrow. They will make their recommendation to the full state board on Thursday. So we're doing a little event with the kids' parents. We're hoping it is positive for Dover, where the select committee does not approve Washington Township leaving. It will have huge detrimental effects to taxpayers and the education system of Dover.
On both sides or just on the Dover side?
Dover side, and most of the parents from Washington Township want to stay with Dover. There's a lot of education benefits. They have a phenomenal career and tech education system, full day kindergarten. There's tons of stuff that are more beneficial for those kids in Dover than Washington or Northern School District. Northern School District is an excellent school district as well. But those parents want to go to Dover. They have an entire organization set up for it. It's a $1.8 million hole based on max index. You're looking at $600,000 a year for Dover. It would take 3 years max index of tax increases to pay that back. Probably mixed with letting teachers go and staff go. So it's just going to hurt the education system. It's going to kill the taxpayers. So it is a very, very big deal, and it's off of education. It's not predicated on property taxes. It's best predicated on a better education system. And when you look at data, Northern may be better here, Dover's here. There's no real huge difference between the two.
So the prediction is not going to happen.
That's what we're going with.
All right, I think Flint had a question or two?
Yeah, well, so another judge's recent decision, I guess U.S. District Judge Lawrence F. Stingel's ruling to make it easier for third-party and independent candidates to get onto ballots. We spoke in the past of Grove and Saylor, you and I have spoken on this, but how do you feel that a judge has ruled that there's too many restrictions on third-party and independent candidates?
I am perfectly content with having everybody have the same exact rules as us. 300 signatures to be a state rep, 500 to be a state senator, there's 1,000 to be a congressman, whatever. Same exact. Level the playing field, everybody has to do the exact same thing, but they have to go to their own party. I have to go to the Republicans, Kevin has to go to the Democrats. If you're Bull Moose Party, I think there was still one in your district at some point. Whatever party you are, go to them, get signatures, get on the ballot, give them primary ballot access, give them general election ballot access, and let's have it out. I'm perfectly comfortable with that. I just want it fair across the board. Like right now, Steve Cronister has to get how many signatures?
900.
900, but it's anybody can sign it. Any registered voter can sign it. That's a lot easier than just going and getting a few often. I have an entire scheme of the fact that percentage of area that you represent, amount of people you represent, and how many signatures you actually get. We actually have to get more signatures than the rest based on our smaller districts and our population base.
And the other thing is, I actually experienced a major problem back when I ran in '92. There were, I believe, 12 candidates on the Republican side, 5 Democrats in the primary. So of that, 4, I believe it was 4 Republicans were thrown off the ballot because they had duplicate signatures of what other candidates had. So when you're in a district and you're trying to get signatures, you're only allowed one signature of one petition. Well, when there's 11 Republicans running or 11 Democrats, whatever it is, it's tough to make sure you don't get the same signature. People don't remember what they signed. So for Republicans and Democrats alike, the system can be a major problem as it is now. I've suggested that maybe we look at a filing fee rather than signatures. You pay so much and you can get on the ballot, or you can go get signatures. In other words, you have 2 options. You can pay a certain filing fee, or you can go get signatures so that the process works. Because we have to pay a filing fee anyway. Maybe you raise that filing fee. I think for us it's $125. There's other ways to do it, depending on your district. And in my case, my district, back when I was running, a lot of it was very difficult. You have houses that are miles apart. So it's very difficult to go out there. So everybody tends to focus on Springettsbury, Windsor Township. And when you're trying to get, all those signatures, you're bound to get duplicates because there's people who are never home.
And there's just a lot of shoppers, and so it's hard.
Speaking in hypotheticals like that, if there is what would that filing fee look like?
Well, I think I don't have it like it should be this much.
Other states do. I think Florida does. I don't know what their fee structure is, but there's other states that do it, and you can kind of look at their fee structures, how it works and stuff.
Let's say, what if we flipped it on its head to where, because maybe you are a Bull Moose, and there's not enough bull moose people
Yeah.
within your district to do it,
Yeah.
but you still want to run and you really feel that party platform is perfect for you or something.
Yeah.
What if it was flipped on its head and then it was anybody can go to anybody, no matter what your party is? So
Yeah.
you could collect from Democrats or bull moosers or communists even, whatever, you know.
So you kind of like, you're kind of talking about open primary system, kind of. There's, to be realistic, there's always games you can play within an open primary system. If I have 2 Republicans running and 1 Democrat running, I can tell all the Democrats, go vote for the weakest candidate of the Republicans so we can beat them. Or when you're working on petitions, just try to get as many petitions as you possibly can, signatures, take them off the ballot. So there's manipulation within the confines of open primary systems. I like the closed primary system because Republicans get to select Republicans. Democrats, your party gets to select who you want out of that. You know, I don't know if this is better. Louisiana has a runoff where everybody runs off in the primary, the 2 highest candidates on the ballot in the general. Maybe that's a better way to do it, where everybody is included in the primary. You can vote for whomever you want. You know, you're still party designation, so there's, you know, your voters are pushing that person up. And then at the end of the day, if the Bull Moose Party and the Star Trek Party win in the general, they're buying off each other.
But you have to remember, there are other parties, Republican and Democratic parties, are the only ones that really have primaries. A lot of the other parties choose to do conventions where they have closed-door meetings. If you remember Ross Perot and some of these other groups that are out there, the Green Party, they pick their candidates in like a little mini convention, whoever they happen to invite to pick their candidates. Which is better? I mean, people sit here and want to criticize Democrats and Republicans. Well, at least ours is open to people voting and choosing, not in a smoke-filled room. Well, who has most influence so I can get to be presidential candidate or whatever on the Green Party or whatever. So Ross Perot's party was supposed to be this great independent party. Well, they were sitting in smoke-filled rooms picking candidates for each of their state house or whatever seats.
But, okay, I'm an independent, not registered in any party, but I can't come to your party on primary day. I can't vote for anybody, but I have to pay for your primary. Why do I have to pay for it as a taxpayer?
Choose a party. You know what I tell
Why do
people?
I have to choose a party?
Because here's why. It's because look, you have philosophies that either line up with Republicans more or Democrats more or the Green or whatever party it is. My personal thing is, I'm a Republican. I know where I don't agree with everything that the Republican platform necessarily says, but I know that I'm basically a Republican. And I want to make sure that my party is basically here, wherever that is. I don't want somebody who's not loyal to my party coming in and changing my platform or changing things like that.
But if you get me in your party,
I tell people, now let me finish. What I tell people all the time is, look, I'm a Republican, but I'd rather you register as a Democrat than not be an independent because you're making a decision. Make a decision where you're at. Everybody has to make decisions in life. And the political process only works. In Italy, look at Italy. They went through 9 prime ministers in 1 year at one time. This idea that, oh, the two-party system doesn't work. It does work. It's okay to have 3rd and 4th parties. But I looked at Israel. We were talking about that when we were in Israel. My God, their government could collapse at any point in time. The great thing about our country is there's been consistency in government. You may not like the president, you may not like the Congress, whatever it is, but we have overall a great government, and it's because of the two-party system. It wasn't always Republican Democrats. There were Federalists and Whigs and so on and so forth. It has worked. To sit there and say we're going to let any number of people to switch and come and start changing the parties, I don't think it's good.
Okay,
Well, and here's the
just
thing,
one-
regardless of, we're not going to change this in the next year, next 2 years, right?
Or
So
ever.
what I would say to you, having run for a school board director,
Yeah.
school board directors have a huge amount of impact on your life and your pocketbook,
Read my
right? They
Thursday
educate your
editorial.
children, right? The biggest tax bill you get is from your
Absolutely.
school board.
Absolutely.
If you don't register as a Democrat or a Republican, you may completely miss out
And
because
that's
when
why it's wrong.
Well-
If it's a cross-file party, you have no
I
business
don't-
keeping independents
Quite
out of that
honestly, if
primary
you
system.
cross-file,
just don't.
then maybe we shouldn't even primary those people. Maybe we should, or do what they do in
Well,
Louisiana,
shouldn't
just put
independents
them
be
right
able to
on.
vote in elections where cross-filing is allowed? Because they're ostensibly nonpartisan.
But aren't you changing the Democratic or the Republican Party's philosophies by allowing you to vote? Because you're choosing as to who and what the Republican or Democratic
But
Party is by voting.
You're allowing Republicans to register as Democrats and Democrats to register as Republicans. what difference does it make? These are school boards. They're not.
Oh,
like,
we're not talking about school board, I'm talking about
No, I'm saying
overall.
that's why,
Well, that's why
you
I'm
really
saying
should
it's-
make a choice,
Well,
yeah.
Until
But
or
that-
unless the system is changed.
I truly admire those who choose to register as Green
Because then
Party.
people will look up our registration and say, well, that's, of course he wrote that, because he's a fill in the blank.
Look, I don't make decisions, I mean, some people, it's easy, you're right, but that's true with us too. People say, oh, well, Stan Saylor votes for the Republican Party all the time, almost all the time. Well, of course, I'm a Republican, I'm gonna vote more predominantly with the Republicans than Democrats on issues. But to me, the parties were created because of certain philosophies. That doesn't mean everybody in the Republican or Democratic parties agree with everything their party stands for. But it lends to the quality of what I believe is government. Now, we've had a few problems in Washington lately, but I think in Pennsylvania, the two-party systems have worked. We've seen in, I think it was Michigan a number of years ago, where the Democrats tried to elect a Republican candidate in the governor's race a week or lesser. This doesn't allow those games. If you really want to really play game in Pennsylvania, I guess you'd really have to convince all the Democrats or all the Republicans to switch to the other party just for the primary. We had people in York County switch from Republican to Democrat to vote for Tom Wolf in the primary. I have no problem with that. But to make it easy for the games to be played by either political party, I think you're creating a system. We already know there's voter fraud out there. There's no fans of us. How many people are going to jail in Philadelphia? I mean, it's outrageous. We had a woman ran for Congress in Pennsylvania who was registered in Philadelphia and in Florida. You know, she voted both places in the same election. We've seen it in Maryland. We sit around here and close our eyes, as I told a history professor. Where were you at in teaching history if you don't know there's voter fraud out there?
Yeah, but you still haven't found an example.
Ones and twos of people who are doing this.
Yeah, I mean, you still.
You think it is one or two,
That
too.
ballot, that going to the ballot, you still never found one that you could put in court and to prove.
Well, that's because people have, in Philadelphia, in my personal opinion, the Republican Party and Democratic Party in Philadelphia have collusions on this game. Ask Angel Cruz, who's a Democrat in Philly, how the boxes are stacked against him sometimes in different precincts by Democrats against him, and he's a Democrat, trying to get rid of him. You got to talk to members who are sitting in those places where corruption takes place. Or when there was a recount in votes in Washington County, where they found people going in to a secure room by sheriff's deputies. Well, actually, they had to post sheriff's deputies because they caught somebody in there trying to change ballots. This isn't just anywhere. I don't think it happens everywhere, but we know it happens. I mean, it's just there.
Okay.
I mean, when you talk to Democrats who don't want to go on record because they don't like the idea of ID because that's kind of what they're against, but you talk to Angel Cruz, I've talked to some of the minority members, the black members as well as the Philadelphia group, who talk about the Philadelphia machine stacking the ballots in their precincts to take them out and put somebody in who's more favorable to the machine. There is a machine in Philadelphia on both sides.
Well, then we perhaps need more investigations into this, because nobody's being
I agree.
charged or
Yeah.
convicted on these.
I agree
If
100%.
that's true, then that's really, I mean,
Yeah.
then that's really a problem, and that's really what we need to do, is
Yeah.
put more effort into exposing these frauds, because to the general public, when you said there's all this voter fraud, what we say is, I haven't seen one prosecution of anyone for voter fraud.
Oh, we did have
So
Philadelphia
it's
judges. We had some
okay,
judges go to
okay.
judges who allowed immigrants to vote illegally in
I
Philly.
think Philly just did some the last round. Just like usually after every election, just check the Philly newspapers. They usually bring them in. They're usually misdemeanor offenses, so they're usually slap on the wrist, sent away.
Whose jurisdiction would it be to investigate?
The DA's.
DAs, the
DAs.
DA.
But I've been yelling at the Attorney Generals to do the same thing.
Yeah.
The State Attorney General needs to have people respecting the electoral process. And when people suspect fraud, or pretty much look at results sometimes and you can tell there's fraud, in Philadelphia in particular, in some precincts. And when Democrats and Republicans in Philly, particularly the Democrats, I don't hear Republicans in Philly complaining about fraud because they have a game they play. You don't complain, you get these amount of jobs, okay? Whether we like it or not, it's the way it is in Philly. I'm sorry, that's just wrong in the political process, whether Republicans benefit or Democrats. I'm not sitting here saying Republicans across this country haven't done voter fraud. I'm not saying, this isn't like, oh, it's all Democrats. This is voter fraud in this country. And to me, if you want people to believe in the electoral process, they have to believe above all that one vote does count. And by, whether it's Louisiana, it's Chicago, or Philadelphia. I don't hear this when I hear about New York City. I don't hear about voter fraud in New York City, which is amazing. 11 million people and nobody talks about voter fraud. And I believe they probably don't, because they probably have a system in place that it doesn't happen. But we don't have that in Philadelphia. We, apparently from what I see in Louisiana, I'm not sure they have it there either, or Chicago. So, I'm just saying to you,
It's part of the culture in this.
it's part of the culture. I'm not saying every place, every state has voter fraud, but we have not put in place. I've seen the videos of the polling places. Senator Fumo owned several places where the polling place was on the second floor with steps only, not handicapped, but they got away with it in Philadelphia. Bars were open, and the polling place was in the bars in Philadelphia. I mean, a lot of that's changing. I mean, people are now kind of changing some of that. But in the last 4 or 5 years, those things were going on in Philadelphia. And that's what I'm saying is, and I agree with you guys, we need more people voting. But people don't want to vote because they don't feel their vote counts anymore. We have to be, I think, more transparent in our voting process. I think we in government have become more transparent than ever before. Maybe we need to go further. But the election process in some areas is not that open, and it's very intimidating for people. That's got to stop. And somebody's got to be there to enforce it. If the DA is not, the Attorney General has to make sure that they do it. Selective prosecution. Those are the kind of things that we see take place. Well, does my party benefit versus your party benefit? Well, if it benefits my party, I'm going to let it go on. So, like I said, I'm not pointing fingers at Democrats. I'm pointing fingers at both parties.
And one thing that I do want to add is that our Department of State does have information sharing agreements with other states through computer programs to make sure that Joe Smith, who used to be registered in Maryland, who is still registered in Maryland but actually lives in Pennsylvania, is not voting in Maryland and Pennsylvania, which is critically important.
New,
and it's very, very
and it's
new.
working.
But it is working, and I actually had a couple constituents who came to me and asked that question because of where we sit. And they have neighbors and friends who have done it. And I looked at them and I said, we're going to look into it. We contacted the State Department, and there is in fact a system where they're trying to weed those double registrations out.
I recently read something about that.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, go out in my district, and probably Kristen's, and you'll find developments when you drive through, people living there with still have license plates on, and they've been there a year
Oh,
or
I've
two.
heard from so many readers who say that they don't ever
And
intend to change
supposedly
it,
the
because
law
in
is-
Maryland, you don't have to live there.
The federal law says you cannot have a license in Maryland or any state if you live in another state.
Yeah.
You can't use a post office box. So how are these people doing it? They're doing it, and at this point I'm saying Maryland's not enforcing the law. I get one of the big complaints. I get 3 complaints that I get in my office, other than property taxes, 2 other ones. Food stamps and license plates are the 3 top complaints I get in my office. So it's just one of those things is like when I drive through, when I knock on doors campaigning, I'm seeing a Maryland car in the doorway, and I know they've been there in the last election as well. So it is a problem we have about people or states enforcing the laws that are on the books. And like I said, when Angel Cruz or whoever complains, again, I've mentioned Angel because he's out there, he's already proposed legislation. I'm not going to mention any of the members from Philly, but Angel Cruz has proposed changing the laws as far as registration is concerned, and verification and polling and ID. Not quite as far as the Republican proposal went, but there is a fear.
Well, I thank you so much for your time. Before we go, I just want to extend an invitation to you all, and I know none of you cover York City, that's not your district, but we're going to be holding an event October 13th at Martin Library. We have a Facebook group called Fixing York, Pennsylvania, that's basically a discussion group for people to come up with ways to improve the city, to improve government systems and so forth. So we're going to have basically a town meeting type thing. Mayor Bracey's going to be there. We're inviting various state lawmakers. We're hoping that Kevin will be there. But if any of you have any interest in, I know that we talk about the importance of the suburbs and the city working together. If you're interested in being there, we'd love to have you there.
Municipal pension reform's top of the list, right? Number 1.
It might be on there. I would. But actually,
made
literally, you know what? It's
significant progress on that.
the top of the list is
We
new
have.
litter. I'm
Yeah.
sorry to say, but that's
Date and time again?
Saylor, do you, Representative Saylor, do you have your legislative expenses posted on your website yet?
I don't know if I do. I don't worry about it, I gotta be honest. It's all public record. You can get them if you want them. I don't. Seth is more techie than I am.
Mine are there.
So is Kevin Schreiber.
Mine are there.
And I don't worry about it. again, actually, I don't know if it's this paper or the Dispatch calls us boring, because we don't do anything out of line.
Was
Was it Scott, were you calling us boring? So, it just gets down to is,
Hey, sure.
it's available.
It's better to be boring than.
Exactly.
Oh, I like being boring. I think it's very healthy to be boring.
I usually joke with people. They say, "I saw you in the paper." I was like, "Well, it's not going to be in the crime section of the obituary."
Well, thank you so much. We
Thank
really
you. I
appreciate your
appreciate
time.
it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
It's nice to have a spirited exchange. We like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes we just get kind of it's like you're